Hello, everyone, and welcome to this legal webinar run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm on incident reporting, focusing on the NDIS standards and also your legal compliance obligations. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session and delighted to see the huge number of NDIS providers that are joining us from right around the country today. Today's session is going to focus on the specific requirements under the NDIS standards and also explore the requirements on the broader incident reporting requirements for your agency. So we are going to give you the tools, legal resources that you and your agency can actually start using after today's webinar. We are going to make this webinar recordings available and also all the materials that you see me use today, including this presentation slides and also sample policy documents and the likes, including even the NDIS Legal Resources dashboard. We will give you access to actually look at these particular resources and tools after today's session if you don't already have access to that. So today's legal webinar is going to give you the introduction on, well, what is the legal definition of what an incident is? We're going to look at the policy framework. What should you have in your policy documents? We're going to look at what a reportable incident is and what the definition of that is, and not only under the NDIS standards, but also legal definitions as well. We're going to look at identifying types of incidents and what those look like, and also look at the reporting of an incident and how to actually do it. This is one of the questions, or not one of the questions, a number of questions that and comments that we actually got from NDIS providers since opening this webinar up a few weeks ago. And a lot of NDIS providers actually came back to us asking quite similar questions, saying, look, what is the definition of an incident? When should I report? And some of the definitions of what is actually required to do as an NDIS provider is quite confusing. And this is what we are looking to actually clarify for yourselves today and actually give you the tools in order to do that and show you what has also been done within other agencies. So just one slide only as an introduction of who we are and what we do. Kaizen Synergy Law Firm is a law firm that I actually set up some 15 years or so ago. It came out of work with community service organisations, and as part of this, we now are based, or one of our sites are actually based at the Trobe University Law School, where we actually teach, I'll say, the next generation of quality, compliance, and policy officers and risk officers that often work in community service organisations, including many NDIS provider organisations as well. So we've been supporting agencies even actually before the NDIS standards commenced. We've provided legal advice, review entire policy registers, provide staff training, deal with contractual issues, assist NDIS providers like yourselves in reporting issues or incidents to the NDIS. We work with organisations if they need assistance with preparing for their audits, or even in the event where they might have a corrective action requirements that they need to action coming out of an audit, then we assist organisations to actually do that. The other part that we also have is the NDIS Legal Resources dashboard, which you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. You will get access to the demo version of this by attending this webinar today. And a lot of the time we'll actually field simply questions from NDIS providers. So apart from specific legal advice, sometimes NDIS providers simply just call us to ask questions. And with this, you've got my direct mobile number listed on the screen. It's been on Google for over 20 years or so now. Plus, also, it means then that if you've got questions coming out of the legal webinar, we are very hands-on in the work that our law firm does. And we've done this, as I said, even before the NDIS standards commenced. So we're running this legal webinar to share some of the learnings that we've seen with NDIS providers like yourselves. And one of the things I will say is that with the policy documents, advice that we're going to walk you through, some of the training materials that are also used within other NDIS providers, it works, to be simple. And compliance at its core can be quite confusing. When we've delivered these documents into different NDIS providers around the country, and most recently to one NDIS provider that went through a major audit just in the last couple of weeks, they've implemented the incident policies, the incident definitions, the workflows that I'm going to explore with you today, and also the incident reporting framework in order to make compliance easy and simple for staff to actually use. And at the end of the day, also improve the services that you are delivering to your participants as well. So that's a bit of brief introduction about our law firm and the work that we do. So when we look at incident reporting for NDIS providers, again, it tends to focus specifically on the compliance documents, which is a fair point to kind of start with. And a lot of NDIS providers will start with, well, hang on, this is what the standards require us to do, and that should really be our focus. Now, with this, we have just going to take one step back a little bit to actually say, well, why do an incident report? Now, many agencies go, oh, look, I hope this legal session isn't going to run off on a tangent. Well, no, it's not. And I say this because NDIS is just one part of what incident reporting is actually about. And I had a discussion with a provider yesterday that called up asking around, well, she wasn't sure why an NDIS, why the incident report was really required when she's actually providing allied health services, but is brought in only as required. And I said, well, let's actually go back one step when you're talking of incident reporting and actually look at how incident reporting can actually be what I'll say, a valuable tool for yourselves as NDIS providers. Now, in doing that, what I mean by this, just to kind of give you a bit of background on this, is that incident reporting under the NDIS really should be seen as just one part, because essentially, when you talk of incident reporting, whatever type of entity your NDIS provider is, whether it's registered under ASIC, whether it's registered as an incorporated association, whether it's registered also as a charity too. Well, there are broader requirements for actually managing incident within your agency effectively. One of these is around the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which requires employers and self-employed persons to manage and notify WorkSafe immediately as you become aware of them around incidents involving serious injuries, illnesses, dangerous conduct. So there may well be a duty to notify, there may be immediate notification requirements, and this also includes different types of incidents. So this could include serious injuries, illnesses, dangerous occurrence in the workplace, if it involves plants or specific equipment. Plus, also, if you are a person conducting a business or undertaking, or as the legal term is, PCBU in this case, then you must notify your state WHS regulator immediately where there is a serious work-related injury or illness or dangerous incident. And these are called notifiable incidents. Now, what I'll say is in the pathway, this is just one section of an incident report that often NDIS providers miss. And over the last couple of weeks, there have been numerous calls from different NDIS providers um, raising these very issues and saying, well, who do I also need to report to? Is it only the NDIS? And in some cases, the answer may well be no. Now, on top of this, should I say, there may well be also broader requirements. So, if you're a director under ASIC, then you've got directors' duties as directors to make sure that your incident reporting and risks are managed effectively. If you're registered with the ACNC as a charitable organization, then there are governance standards that deal with risk management from a charity side. If there is a contract issue, and we had a NDIS provider raise an issue where there was an incident involving a participant, which then resulted in them wanting to withdraw their contract and participant agreement, which led to a contract issue. And then there were fair work issues with staff, where an incident occurred, and then a number of years later, a previous employed staff member actually raised fair work issue because saying that they had an ongoing injury as a result of not being trained. So you can see these types of issues that I'm now raising is actually a little bit broader than just NDIS reporting requirements that you as a provider needs to consider. So in this case, what I'm saying here is that not everything may be reportable to the NDIS or other reportable entities, but you may want to show that issues have been managed. So it might be a staff issue has been resolved, for example, training on how to lodge an incident, or there might be a contractual issue with an allied health provider or something else. Again, it is broader than just the NDIS standards that you need to actually consider as part of providing business and running your business or running your services as well. And so, on this, one of the things that our law firm has advised NDIS providers, and I'll call this is my sort of whiteboard drawing on this, is that an issue may be raised or come to you as obviously an incident, but it might also come as a comment or feedback or complaint initially. And so, when you consider your incident reporting policy or the like, how does this actually come? Is someone actually just making a comment or feedback about an issue that they are reporting to you? Is this actually an incident, or could this lead to an incident itself? Now, that in itself may simply be a case of you need to consider what is the issue being asked for yourselves. But all of this could actually be managed very quickly. So, what I mean by that is, and it's going to sound strange, a lawyer saying, well, let's try and avoid legal issues. Okay. So, on this, it might be that a comment or feedback or complaint has come in. Now, if you can quickly resolve this before it becomes a incident, then you may need to simply communicate actions being taken. It might be something as simple the way staff have spoken to a participant. It may not meet the thresholds of what we'll talk about, bullying and harassment. It may be just that the participant has spoken abruptly to someone, giving them a direction, but it doesn't constitute bullying and harassment. Now, that might come as a comment or feedback or complaint from a staff member. So you might want to actually simply communicate to both participant and your staff on how this has been resolved. And this is where right at the top of this screen, you can see here that I've simply said communication back and managing this. And this avoids potentially any further, what I'll say, incident reporting or legal action, legal issues arising. If that doesn't happen, then it might be, and all of this I will add could be actually internal to your agency. It doesn't have to be something that is actually being reported to the NDIS, but it may then go on. So in this case, you might open an incident report, and this is where you then assess whether it is a reportable matter to an external body like WorkSafe or the NDIS, and then what is the process to actually manage this. Now, on this, it may well be that a report is made to the NDIS, and we'll talk about that throughout this session. And then what are the actions being taken? Now, one of the things that I will add here is we advise agencies that when you are making a report to any external regulator, have a plan at least on how you intend to manage it. Don't leave the matter simply open for interpretation. At least show how your agency is managing an incident to essentially close it off. And that's really important. And that's advice that we give to all of our clients over the number of years that we've been working with community service organizations, is that if you are reporting to any regulator, have a plan to show, or even auditor for that matter, have a plan to show how you are actually managing this and what course of action you are taking, and make sure that it's an appropriate level of course of action as well too. Once that occurs, then essentially what we are looking to do is to say, look, while that report is being made, action is being taken on this to look at closing it if you can, and then also, again, that reports back to avoiding further legal issues as they come up. And some of these under separately, we've run legal webinars. I won't discuss it and go into too much detail here, but if you do have questions, you can ask us on this. Is around open disclosure, and a lot of state departments around the country have moved to open disclosures by saying sorry where occurrence has occurred, and essentially taking the steps to manage that in an appropriate way. So essentially, once we've done that and looking at the requirements under legislation, as you can see, it is quite broad. Now, that being said, this now then brings us to looking at what sort of policy you need to have in place. So essentially, we have a standard policy that incorporates what we are talking about here and references to key legislation, as well as also the NDIS standards. So what we're looking at here is at the heart of what disability support is around safety, accountability, and care. So during this presentation, we're going to look at introducing incident reporting policy to ensure that all incidents involving participants are managed effectively and promptly, and also reported accurately as well too. It also ensures that you remain compliant with NDIS core modules and meeting all of your legislative, regulatory, and contractual obligations. Now, to jump into the policy document, and let me just bring this up for you. Here it is here. So our policy that we have just drafted, and you will get a copy of this, is to cover off an overarching policy requirements on ensuring that you meet the incident reporting requirements under the NDIS standards. And this is to ensure that it is managed effectively in accordance with the NDIS standards, as well as also the requirements essentially under the incident reportable rules as well too. So what we have here is we've outlined the responsibilities. It is also identified, and you can change this. We've simply made this the director, but it might be CEO or it might be quality or risk manager within your organization. It is a requirement under the procedure and NDIS standards that it meets specific incident management reporting systems, and we've got the details of these here. It also requires you to keep documentation and record keeping of what the incident actually involves, what the system components are, and this basically gives you a checklist, if you like, to manage and assess whether your current reporting system does all of these things. It also requires you to ensure that you review incidents and policies in alignment with cause and analysis. So identifying trends, looking for opportunities for improvement, and obviously providing feedback on collection of this. It also asks you to provide under the standards worker awareness training on what the incident involved, what the investigation procedures were, and what the ongoing training is. So within this policy document, which I'll just jump back to the slides, it also then covers what is the reporting requirements and definitions of the NDIS timeframes for reporting specific incidents. So we do have all of these covered within the policy document. Now, on this, essentially what we've got is one of the issues that agencies ask us on is, well, what scope should our policy actually cover? Um, who is covered under this policy? Is it just staff or participants or contractors? Well, it's everyone. So the idea is that the incident policy itself should actually apply to all staff, participants, and contractors affiliated with your company. It is the responsibility of all employees and participants to comply with this policy to ensure that all incidents are managed promptly, appropriately, and in a way that prioritizes the health, safety, and well-being of the people that you support. Now, while the scope of the policy is there, often we will advise agencies to look at providing obviously supported training to staff as well, but also include policy documents in induction procedures. When you are onboarding staff, however small your organization is, this still applies. It may also be that if you do have contract arrangements with other providers, it might be allied health services, or you might be an allied health provider um, engaged by a NDIS provider, then again, looking at what the scope of their policy is to ensure that you meet your requirements under the incident reportings. And I will come back to that for yourself because that was something that was discussed with a number of allied health providers that are joining us today. So let's have a look at the definitions of what a reportable incident actually is. Now, a reportable incident is defined as an act, omission, event, or circumstance. Now, under the NDIS, reportable incidents are serious incidents or alleged incidents which result in harm to an NDIS participant in connection with NDIS support services. Now, this definition arises under Section 73Z4 of the Act and Section 16 of the Incident Management and Reportable Incident Rules. It also covers the NDIS Quality and Safety Guards Commissions for those of you that like these references. And the incident must have occurred or be alleged to have occurred in connection with the provision of services that you are providing. So that's the definition of a reportable incident to the NDIS. Now, one of the things that I did mention early on, and I'm just going to jump back to my previous slide, here it is here, is that that's the definition of a reportable incident with the NDIS. And we're going to explore what those specific requirements are and definitions. But I stress for your agency, it's actually important just also from a management of comment, feedback, or complaint, but also from a legal side. When we get brought in to support NDIS agencies, we look at, well, what actually happened prior to that incident? Is there, while it might be a reportable matter, what is the risk to you as an NDIS provider or agency? And what I mean by that is there issues that or comments that have been provided by participants? Is there other incidents that might have been reported by staff, or are there any other complaints? Because those things that I just mentioned are actually a risk to your agency. And this is often missed by NDIS providers. And we drum it into NDIS providers often by saying, look at the previous issues that have actually come up. And when I say not incidents, issues. And so on this, what we are looking at here is what can we do to minimize these corporate risks to your agency? Because if we can minimize these risks to your corporate agency right at the top here, then hopefully we can actually avoid any future reportable incidents ever occurring to the NDIS. And this is the part that a lot of agencies actually miss. So it is something that I'm saying from the workflow side, do not underestimate the issue, the identification, early identification of comments, feedback, or complaints in relation to incident reporting. Now, jumping to our slide on what a reportable incident actually is. Well, it is defined as a death of a person with a disability, serious injury of a person with a disability, abuse or neglect of a person with a disability, unlawful sexual or physical contact with or assault of a person with a disability, excluding in the case of unphysical assault or contact with when that person is negligible, if there is sexual misconduct or the use of restrictive practices in, in relation to a person with a disability. And it might also be as part of this that you do look at the descriptions under state or territory requirements, depending on where your agency is based. Now, again, one of the issues that has been raised and questions that have been raised over the last couple of weeks by a number of agencies that contract in with NDIS providers is saying, we may know that something has occurred. Like we've had an allied health provider raise with us that they suspected that there was abuse or neglect of a person with a disability during one of the consults that they had. But they said, we're not an NDIS provider, but are we supposed to actually have an incident report that actually says that we've actually contacted the NDI? What should we do? And our response to that was absolutely. Lodge your own incident, keep your own incident report. You may well already do that under your client record system or participant record system. And in doing that, you might then also inform the NDIS provider that what the reasons are where you believe that there is abuse or neglect of the participant. So you've got that information at hand and also managed your organizational risk, even though at that stage it may not have been a reportable incident. Now, when you identify these types of incidents as we go through, it is important to consider that incidents can be identified in various ways. They might be witnessed, as I said, by a worker, disclosed by a person with a disability, or reported by someone else, like an allied health worker or contractor or the likes. It might even be a BSP provider as well too that's actually identified key risks that have been as part of the plan that they're developing. Now, it's important that all staff know how to respond when an incident occurs. So this brings it back to why I started with the policy in the first place. So the idea of this is that you should aim to build a culture where staff feel confident and supported in reporting incidents, no matter how minor or serious they may seem. So we've divided these up into some incidents are obvious, like something witnessed firsthand. However, others may be identified where there is abuse or neglect and can be harder to spot, or by identifying and reporting incidents early, you can improve quality and safety to your participants. So, identifying incident types and to look at what these require, well, then these could be under the different specific headings that I'm just going to walk you through now. So, these could be under things like physical abuse, where behavior indicators and physical signs are there. It can involve a number of unexplained actions as well too. It can also be identified as of requirements where it is can be vague, it can be unlikely explanation of an injury or the likes. And I can see there's just a question that's just come through in looking at incident types and definitions on is there any guidance on whether we can provide regarding the hierarchy of legislation. For example, does privacy or fair work legislation outweigh NDIS Act obligations? Essentially, what I'll say, there's not really the hierarchy that I'd say occurs here. What occurs is actually when the incident and what's involved in the definition of the incident itself. So if I was to look back at my pathway, for example, and I will just scroll back in to this slide here. It's my simplest slide that we have. It may well be that under the definition, it on this workflow here, and it's quite a simple workflow that we have. The workflow itself may simply identify that there may well be a comment of complaint that's been raised, but it's not defined as a reportable incident to the NDIS. So consequently, while there's no hierarchy, it may be determined on when or where it's actually occurred and what's actually been involved in this. So on this is where we then look at things, other incident types like sexual abuse. So this could be under the broad definition, and we've pulled a lot of these definitions to also answer your questions from not only the NDIS legislation and standards and case law as well too, but we've also looked at definitions of what sexual abuse is under different state and Commonwealth law and territory laws as well too, and also looking at what the broader definitions of sexual abuse and physical abuse can actually involve. So it can also include, as parts of this, psychological abuse. And again, under human rights legislation, we can see there's different definitions that you can pull from across different legislation in all of these definitions that we can see here. So this, in this case, this can involve depression or withdrawal, being secretive, speech disorders, some weight gain or weight loss. Now, again, on this is just some of the indicators. This may not effectively, just because someone gains weight, may be resulting into medication that they may be on or the likes, doesn't mean that they're under psychological abuse. So this is where there is some discretion and investigation that may also need to occur. Same thing with incident types involving domestic violence. Now, again, behavioral indicators or physical signs could involve depression, withdrawal, crying, or emotional behavior. It might be extreme attention seeking or being overly compliant, or even feelings of worthlessness, or how they might um, display different physical signs. Now, these are not just legal definitions that we're seeing here, but it is also, as I mentioned, behavioral indicators of physical signs. So these are the types of things that your agency needs to include as part of its policy and staff training, so that way support workers that are actually providing services to some of the more vulnerable people in our community are looking out and aware of what these particular physical and behavioral signs actually include. Financial abuse, again, and this is one just bringing back to the previous question, is where it actually overlaps even with things like ACNC governance standards under ensuring that you've got, for a registered charity, financial abuse policies and the likes to protect vulnerable people in our community. So again, you can see that the incident types, and picking up what the allied health workers have asked me over the past couple of weeks, is, well, these are some of the physical signs that they actually identified and consequently reached out to the NDIS provider to have these discussions. Now, so when we're bringing all of this together, and we've then looked at how do you then report an incident. Now, this can be under the NDIS standards, where there is specific requirements that the NDIS standards require you to do when reporting an incident. And there is, again, specific details on the types of incident management systems that the NDIS expect you to follow. And as you go through your audits, periodic audits with under the NDIS standards, again, these are what the auditors will look for. We've certainly seen this firsthand over the past few weeks, where a number of NDIS agencies have done their recent audits and consequently had to display, well, what is the workflows that they've actually got to embed these practices and expectations under the NDIS standards and meet the compliance reporting requirements. So essentially looking at workers providing services, identifying an incident, how they provide an immediate response, what is the incident management process, how is the relevant personnel notified, and what actions are in fact taken. And there is quite a detailed list of steps that need to be followed. So what are the details of the incident or allegation? What is the process of this that needs to occur? And I can see that there are questions that are just popping up that my team are just implying me about. So thank you very much for asking these questions as we go through. It also means then that looking at reporting to bodies, assessment and investigations, what is the risk identified, and also being able to consult with the impacted person, and also looking at follow-up actions. When agencies look at this along with the definitions, it is no wonder they say, well, I'm quite confused in how we should actually manage this. So let me show you this in action and how simple this can be. So this is our incident reporting system itself. You all do have access to this and what we call our NDIS legal dashboard. Now, you may well have your own policy and also your own incident reporting system. This is our incident reporting system that a lot of NDIS providers use, and it really just brings it together in terms of the straightforwardness of meeting the definitions, policy requirements, and also incident reports. So here you can see I've got all my buttons. One of these is the NDIS Staff and Incident Report Register, and here it is here. Now I click on this and quite simply, I'm going to add a new entry. Now, when I click on add a new entry, it brings up, first of all, I'm logged in as what I'll call the NDIS admin. Here's my name here. And I've got now the date and time, and I can see I'm about 8 minutes over at the minute. So we will run through this and open it up for questions in the next 3 or 4 minutes of this session. So with this, I've got the date and the time, so I'm meeting my NDIS requirements. I've got embedded in here my NDIS policy that I showed you earlier that meets my requirements that staff can then look at and go, okay, how do we actually meet these requirements? Now, from this, I'm going to look at what is my risk identification. And in this case, I'm going to mark it as low. In what type of matter is this? Is this a general medication or staff matter? And in this case, I'm going to mark that it is all three of those. And what happens from here is that the form extends out and accordions out depending on what questions I've answered. Now, on this, if you remember on my initial workflow, I said, I want to know who was involved in the incident and what happened. So quite simply, I've got what happened, the date, the time, and the exact place that it was reported, that it occurred. I've got the whether it's a reportable incident based on the words that I'm using here, and also looking at what the participant details are. Now, if there was injury to the participant, I can actually mark this on here. Hopefully this wouldn't occur in this level, but it then marks as I'm ticking the person's details, it's also marking up their also other body parts as well. It asks me whether there was anybody else involved in the incident, other details, was first aid called, was there any other police called or ambulance or emergency services called, and depending on what I'm answering here, the form will extend or accordion down. If it involves a medication incident, then of course I'm going to be asked to describe what it was the possible reasons, and also immediate actions taken. So I'm ticking off as we're going through the specific NDIS requirements that I'm needing to meet. I'm also then looking at what are the staff incidents. Now, in this case, if it was a staff member or contractor that was also hurt, it might be not only just physical abuse, but it might also be verbal abuse or the likes, then I can also report all this information in here. Now, depending on what happens, it may well be that I need to report this to WorkSafe. So I've got the initial request here. You may tick that you don't know. And is this a, let's just mark that it's a yes. Now on this, what happens is that, and I'll just cancel this and I'll show you what happens here. So here is something that we're not going to report to the NDIS in this case, okay? So this was something that we just lodged at 10:14 before this webinar. I'm going to open this up. And this was simply a matter that I tripped on a torn piece of carpet and spilt my coffee this morning while preparing this webinar. It didn't really happen. It's just a test case. So on this, I've now gone through and completed this. Now, importantly, what happens is this. We've now got an action plan to say, what have I done and when? So if I'm actually, one of the things that the NDIS and other regulators ask you to do in your incident reporting, whether you're reporting this to the NDIS or not, is why I'm saying this. We've got action plan, we've got evaluation, and we've got learnings. So in this case, this matter simply involved that Fred, who lodged this incident, actually tripped on a torn piece of carpet and consequently spilled his coffee and had a strain. So in this case, what I am going to simply do is mark in call maintenance to fix carpet. We are going to then say carpet is fixed, and I'm just using this as a really simple example here. What I am going to do is select who the person is that is required to fix this directly, okay? And I've selected the people here. It is the NDIS manager and business development manager. I want this done today and I want it completed by the due date of this coming Friday. So I want this all actioned. Now, what happens from here is that once this is actioned, it automatically gets marked as completed by this person here in my agency. The evaluation is I am informing Fred that this has been done. I'm doing this in real time to show you how this works. The learnings are that we should have regular maintenance reviews of our office. I'm going to say once every 6 months. Okay, something as simple as that. From here, I'm going to mark this as completed. Okay, and quite simply, what I'm going to do here is then turn around and go, okay, from here, I can then click on save. It brings me back and you can see here that it's been marked as completed. So what this does automatically for you, if I was to go back directly to my presentation slide and go back to this particular slide here, this was something that was actually managed internally. It wasn't something that was reported by the incident, but I've managed the risk within my NDIS agency if this was being used. It means, though, that also if it became a reportable incident that something happened, then I'm able to actually go back and then look at what actually occurred and when within this particular action. And how I can do that is by simply going into this section here. Here it is here. And if I was to click on the log items here, then what I've got is the ability to look at any stage when this actually happened and why. And it means then that at no time can anyone turn around to me and say, we didn't action this and manage this risk within our organization very effectively. The auditors, NDIS auditors, love this side of it because this way it shows all the people that were engaged. It was Fred who lodged the incidents. I can then also see if from a charting point of view, exactly what has happened and when, and what the reporting requirements were. So on this, I can actually go down, if I click on charts, for example, and see exactly what the reporting requirements were, who it was done, when it was done, whether there was any behaviors of concern. There was nothing here. And literally, I closed this off within a day of it actually being reported. So you can see very effectively that you've got the capacity to actually do it. So what we're showing you here under this section is how the NDIS policies work, the incident reporting structure works, how it is all brought together for yourselves within one specific section. Now, with this, what we do when we tie all this together, what we do recommend as part of our legal recommendations to you is to review this legal webinar and slide. It gives you all the definitions right across the board for incident reporting across many different acts and legislation. It looks at what is the existing policies that you should have within your organization. It looks at the definitions of incident reporting forms and systems that are required, but also looks at the works that other NDIS providers have already done over the last number of years. You can then review and update your policies and documents to match your legal obligations, and then also provide training to staff. Now, right at the top here, I have said, if you have any questions, just ask us any questions as you go. There's a large number of agencies that have joined us today, and we will be having I can see a huge number of questions coming through on this, and we're delighted. If you'd like, we are going to look at running a second webinar in the upcoming 2 weeks' time as well too. So if you are registered already and attended this webinar, you will get notification about that upcoming follow-up webinar as well too, which will be run same day, same time, again in 2 weeks. So with this, we are going to be circulating out all these materials along with the recording of today's webinar. If you do have any questions, more than happy for yourselves to reach out to us. You can do so by simply calling me directly on my mobile, which is listed here. You can chat to us directly at jemba360.com via our login portal site, if you like, or go to our law firm as well too. We will open up the webinar for questions that people might have. If you are watching this recording after today's live session, we do say thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.